Welcome everybody. So we'll just wait while people file in, and if you could just take a moment to answer that poll question. I've got two poll questions for you. So let us know where you're from. I always like seeing this, Tim. It's always fun to watch. The audience can't see it, but we can see as people come in and they answer the questions. So it's
like a stock ticker. It's like the stock ticker behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like we still have a couple more people that are filing in here.
Perfect.
All right, so it looks like we've got some pretty good participation on that location, on the location question. Thank you for letting us know where you're from. Looks like we have our representation from many of the provinces and a couple people from the states as well. So welcome everybody. I'll just share those results so you can see, mainly from Ontario, but representation from everywhere. All right, so we have one more poll question. And we like to know who our audience is. So let us know what your occupation is. So we've put a number of occupations on there. And if yours isn't listed, then just let us know in the chat. That's good. Looks like we've got a bunch of people in the chat. So be sure to let us know what your occupation is. That would be good. Looks like we've got representation for most of the group here. I'll go ahead and share that poll. Good. It looks like we've got some people chiming in on the chat. All right, so here we go. So Tim, primarily we have builder developers on the call, as well as some renovator or construction trades, some architects and engineers, and government individuals, suppliers, utilities, and let's see, new home sales and a consultant. Okay, perfect. Well, excellent.
Nice. Great mix.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, everybody. I'll stop sharing this here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Stephanie Coleman, and so I'm super excited to have Tim Bailey here to tell us about the 2021 new home buyer preference study results that is in joint partnership with the Canadian Home Builders Association. So what we're going to be doing is I'll be handing the mic over to Tim in just a minute, but I would just like to ask that you'll notice that there's a couple of features there. There's the chat and then there's the Q&A. So if you do have any questions for Tim,
Uh-oh. Hey there?
general comments that you want to add, feel free to use the chat for that. Now, hopefully my internet is okay. So good thing I'm not doing the presenting today. So, but of course we want to thank Enbridge and Susan Cuddy. He is a representative, as well as Michelle Vestergaard.
I think we may have lost Steph. Are you there, Steph? Is Andy handy? Andy there? Andy voting? Can everyone hear me okay at this point? This is Tim. Maybe just jot it in the chat. I'm hearing a yes that you can hear Tim. We can hear Tim. Okay, that's good. I had to reboot my internet today too, so we'll see how this works. Oh, this is the joy of this virtual world. Let's see if we'll give Steph just a second to see if she bounces back here. And if not, I should be able to present my screen and start while she rejoins here. All right, well, maybe I will get rolling while we wait. I think Steph exited and is going to try and rejoin here. So just give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen. get us rolling for today. And then again, Stephanie can jump back in and let us know when she's back. She's going to be monitoring the chat pod today, just to see if there's any Q&A comes in. Maybe one last time, can everyone see my screen okay and hear me okay? Just to make sure Zoom's working all right for everybody. I'm just looking at the chat pod now. I got a yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Lots of yeses. Wow, this is an active group. This is great. This is good that you're an active group too, because we're going to be covering data today. And sometimes data can be, it can make people drowsy at times. So I'm just going to jump into my slide deck and get rolling here. Let me get rid of the chat pod for now.
You sound good, Tim. It's Andy.
Oh, it's perfect. Thanks, Andy. Okay.
Yeah, no, and thanks to everybody for hopping on there today to join Enbridge, BKC, and Tim. So
yes, for sure.
Away you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Yes, and a big shout out. I don't know if Susan can make it today from Enbridge, but great sponsors of these events, and also just great supporters of the industry. So quick background on me while we have this up on screen right now. My name is Tim Bailey, Chief Strategy Officer for Avid Ratings. I've been with the company, I guess, 13 years now, but I've spent most of my life in the building industry. So my dad was a site supervisor, commercial construction, primarily industrial commercial. So I got tossed into a pickup truck at 15 years old. Spent my time through high school, university, laborer, carpenter. Eventually I became a site super myself for a couple of years before I wimped out of that part of the construction industry and went into the office. But again, I'm super passionate about this industry. And I joined Avid again about 13 years ago. Avid Ratings is a customer experience and marketing research company. We've been working with the home building industry exclusively since 1992. So we gather ratings and reviews, we collect research, and only focused on this industry. So we haven't gone out into auto or banking or cell phones. We really call the building industry our home. So today what we're going to do is we're going to dig into these the most recent results. It's the 2021 CHBA Homebuyer Preference Study. It might be a bit of a misnomer, the year that we dated it. This was actually put together and the results were just released at the end of 2021. So could have almost been called the 2022 study. This is the second presentation I've done on this. First one was just before Christmas with CHBA, our partner on this research. But now this is, again, hot off the presses data that we're going to be looking at today. So to kick things off, I want to provide a little bit of background on this study. It was actually started, I guess, in 2015. It's been quite a ride. But we started this study back in 2015 with CHBA, launched it at the CHBA National Conference in Halifax. And we continue to evolve it every year. But, when you think about, the ride we've been on just in the past, 20 months maybe now, I remember going to a webinar, tuning in. It was actually one of the first virtual webinars I went to after COVID broke out. And it was Zonda, a big think tank, a building research company out of the US. And it was amazing at that point because the economist that was presenting in that webinar had thrown out all these possible scenarios for the housing market and the projections forecasts for the overall economy in general. And I'd never seen or heard so many letters of the alphabet in one economic presentation. There was going to be a possible sharp V-shaped recovery. There could have been a flatter U-shaped recovery, maybe a stagnant L-shaped recovery. Talked about a double dip, a W-shaped recovery. Even one of my favorites was the bifurcated K-shaped recovery. And actually that is the one that seems to maybe have materialized to some degree, where some sectors really ramped up after the first impact of the pandemic, while other sectors have struggled, like the service industry, some of that. So we got this sort of bifurcated K-shaped recovery. I know personally, our company, since we deal exclusively in the building market, home building market, March of 2020, we were battening down the hatches and weren't sure what to predict or project. We would have never probably predicted the velocity that we've seen in the housing market since sort of mid 2020. And that, in my gut feel is, and what I'm reading about is, that pressure on availability in Canada is probably going to continue for some time. It's not a switch we can flip on to solve some of the availability, supply and demand issues we're dealing with. I was just reading this week, our immigration targets for Canada are higher than ever before. I think it's 411,000 for this year, 421,000 for next year for immigrants into Canada, which we definitely need them for our labor force. We definitely need high levels of immigration for labor force, but these new citizens have to have places to call home as well. So as we try to navigate some of these crazy times in our industry, I think it's more important than ever before to truly understand what today's home buyers need, also what they want. finding that balance, that dance between the two. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. You know, the CHBA Homebuyer Preference Study, we conduct it each year in partnership with CHBA National. It is the largest homebuyer preference study of its kind in Canada. And as I mentioned, the first year was conducted back in 2015, and we presented the results at the CHBA National Conference in Halifax. Now, this year, 2021 study is now the 7th year. What's cool about that is the first year of the study, and even the first year when we ask a new question in the survey, it allows us to capture baseline data. But as you continue to conduct the study and ask the same question or similar questions, we really start to see trend lines emerge. You start to see more of a, instead of a snapshot picture, we start to see a video of data emerge and more of a story forming. What's really interesting, I think, right now too, is last year's 2020 study, it was actually fielded and closed off just prior to the start of COVID. So because with research in general, you field a study, you tabulate results, you publish the data and reporting. So the 2020 study was fielded prior to this whole COVID mess taking over our worlds. What's super interesting though is the fielding of this most recent study, the 2021 study. It was just completed in September. So it was actually fielded from June 14th of last year to September 27th. So it means that the results that we're looking at in this data set is now, it's really showing the preferences of new home buyers as impacted by over a year, 18 months of a global pandemic environment. So in the 2021 study, just to give you some stats on it, I have them up on screen, but we surveyed just shy of 19,000 new home buyers. So we sent out just shy of 19,000 invitations to take the survey. We had resulting data for 5 provinces across Canada. We received about 1,500, just shy of 1,500 survey responses back. I always think that's amazing because this is a deep survey. This is, not something you're going to get after you leave a Starbucks or buy something online from Amazon. It's a better part of a 200 question survey. And we have 1,500 Canadians this year that took the time to respond back to that. Shout out to we had 72 participating builders this year as well. And big shout out to those builders that participate each year. In order to make this study happen, just a quick backstory on it as well. CHBA reaches out to all their builder members, directly and also through the local and provincial associations across Canada to encourage participation in this study each year. Any builders that then jump in to participate through CHBA, all they have to do is send over some very basic homeowner contact information to CHBA. Typically, we look at the past 2 years of a builder's closings or occupancies, and that becomes the population then, or the contact list that gets sent these invitations to complete the survey. So what's really interesting is now that we've done this for 7 years, I guess, this is the 7th year of the study, we've actually invited nearly 150,000 Canadian new home buyers. We only focus on new homes. This isn't the used or resale market. We've invited nearly 150,000 Canadian new home buyers to participate. We've received nearly 17,000 responses. And again, doing some quick math on that, when you're talking about a survey that's about 200 questions, 190 questions long, that means there's probably the potential of about 3.4 million question responses or data points in our database for the study. So it's just getting to be a behemoth of amazing data. They talk about a big data world we live in. This is definitely a big data piece for the building industry. And this study really does dig deep into things like, who are today's home buyers? How are they shopping? What are they going to be looking for when they're back in market? We do a deep dive on home features and design preferences as well. So what design and layout elements will they be looking for? We get into some products and materials as well. And then we finish off the survey with things like community amenities and proximity preferences. So we have some time today to, hopefully everyone's got a coffee and is ready to look at numbers and graphs and charts. So, and we're just going to be skimming the surface in this webinar today. There's so many ways you can dice and slice this amazing data. So moving into that, I just wanted to talk a little bit too about, every year, we don't want to use the same static survey instrument or survey template each year. So we work with CHBA. We do want to keep it as consistent as possible. So we want to have, links to the trending lines. You don't want to break the links, or if you add new questions every year, it takes a while for them to establish trending. But we do look at the survey instrument itself each year because we want to be collecting the most relevant data, the most topical data for the industry. So just at a high level, some things we revised for this year's survey instrument before we deployed it. We asked a few more questions in the demographic area. So things like gender, education level, we asked in this year's survey. We also got into some more features for various interior areas. So we asked things like, not just what's your favorite flooring, but what would be your flooring type preference in key rooms like the kitchen or your primary suite. We also asked some questions about things like electronic entry systems, asking this year about their preference towards having an electric vehicle charger in the garage. Interesting question this year we added, are they seeking a legal secondary suite? So there's definitely lots of interest in that in the market, which I pulled up a slide we're going to look at today on that. Interesting section as well that we added to the survey, which is about aging in place and home accessibility features. And so some great data that came out of that as well. And also we get into, from that, it sort of spawned into something that I consider convenience or maybe even luxury features. But things like having a master light switch or snow melt for your driveway and stairs, various types of touchless technology. So whether that's motion lights, motion sensor lights, or touchless tech, touchless faucets. And we did ask a question, interestingly, too, trying to gauge the impact of COVID-19 on purchasing decisions. I think they lied to us. I don't know. The respondents, it didn't look like it made a tremendous impact on purchasing decisions. So, but again, these are people that have closed the home in the past couple of years. So it might not be a true indication versus somebody who's in a sales center as a prospect now. So, but trying to get some sort of a gauge on the impact of COVID in general in the data set. So just getting into some of the data, I thought we'd start by taking a look at buyer profiles. So this is a pretty good start off section or big section of the survey instrument itself. And what we see in the resulting data for this 2021 study is the largest cohort of buyers is the millennials. They are now aged 29 to 40 years old. They make up about 38% of the total new home buyers in the study. And that number is actually up. It's up about 2.2% from last year. So it is a growing segment of the market that we see. And it's interesting with the millennials too, that, again, 29 to 40 years old, peak family formation years, peak household formation years. So we can see them definitely as a shining star in the housing market. And then if you combine them with the Gen Z group as well, it's actually a bigger group of Canadians than the boomers. So it's something it's going to be interesting to watch that comes through the housing continuum, already well into it. The next most active group of new home buyers in Canada is my generation, the Gen Xers. And that's a 31% of respondents in this year's study. It is down a couple points from last year, but still a pretty prominent group of activity in the new home market. Next, we also have the baby boomer generation. They turned in at about 24% of new home buyers across the country. Similar to the Gen Xers, that's down slightly from last year. It's down about 1% from last year. So we're seeing that the millennials are increasing in activity in the new home market, Gen X and baby boomers moderating just slightly. And then what's interesting too is this Gen Z group. So the group behind the millennials, younger than the millennials, when we first launched this study in 2015, they weren't even on the radar. They weren't even a slice of the pie on a chart. And now we're seeing that it's fun to watch them emerge. They now make up 6.5% of new home buyers in the study. But when you think about it, the leading edge of Gen Z is now 28 years old. So 28 years, I know they're challenged by affordability. We can get into a whole webinar on things like that, which I won't do today. But again, that Gen Z group, the front edge of them at 28 years old, pretty prime time for household formation and typical family formation as well. We also profile the buyers a few other ways in the survey instrument as well. So we ask how they best describe themselves. Are they a single or a couple without children? Are they a growing family with children? Semi-retired or retired? Are they downsizing? What we see in that data set, and I put a little graph on the screen there as well, the largest buying profile that's purchasing new homes would describe themselves as a growing family with kids. And that's interesting too. It's coming in about 44% of respondents, 43.7%, I think it is on the graph, or 43.9. But what's interesting there too is how that impacts some of the other data we're going to look at based on like home size, number of bedrooms, things like that as well. Now, annual household income, this one can be all over the map, but for the most part, we're seeing is 61% of home buyers have an annual household income of $100,000 or more. We have it sub-segmented as well. But that compares against the first year of the study when that bracket or segment was at 49%. So it's up about 12% since the first year of the study back in 2015. There's also about a third of these respondents, 32%, that would fall into the household income segment of 100,000 to 150. And then there's also a large segment of group as well that would be in the all over the map parts. And this is where I probably caveat the data as well. How we set up the study is you can look at the data as a national level report. So it's a PDF report, or you can go in where we've set up a file that anybody who wants can go in and dice and slice this data further. So you can start to segment. What's interesting is you can cross-analyze. This is where I put my data geek hat on, but you can start cross-analyzing home type and income levels and age cohorts. So you can say, what type of home would I be building, or what would be the preferences of somebody that's looking for a single detached 2-story home that has an income of $100,000 to $150,000, and that's a millennial. So you can start to dice and slice the data. So I always caveat these sort of broad stroke data points with the fact that, if you get into the reporting, you can really get in granular with it. When we look at home price activity, the largest group is looking for homes in the $500,000 to $750,000 segment of the market. And again, depending on geo, that's getting more and more challenging all the time. I think the average price of a single family home in Canada is probably 800,000. I should know that off the top of my head now. I quoted it a bit ago, but it's escalating. So large activity in the $500,000 to $750,000 segment of the market, getting product that suits that is definitely a challenge for our industry, or challenge of our industry. What's interesting, the stat I love bringing up too, is 83% of respondents, and this seems to grow a little bit every year, indicate that they're going to be looking for a new home for their next home. And I think that's just a great vote of confidence for our new home construction industry. These are folks that just moved into a new home in the past 2 years, just went through the process, sales, selections, walkthroughs, all that type of stuff. And then when we send them a survey, this Homebuyer Preference survey, 83% want to go new again. So again, I think it's a great little shout out to the job that our new home construction industry does across Canada. It's not an easy business. And to have 83% saying, I only am going to go new again, is pretty impressive. A new question for this year that we asked as well was education level of today's home buyers. I just, cruising through the data, I just thought, oh, this is kind of interesting. 81% of respondents have completed a post-secondary education. So either a diploma or a degree, college or university graduate. Now we have a bunch of data sort of on marketing resources for finding a builder, marketing resources that are used in your final purchasing decision. I just wanted to touch on a couple of those. This is kind of the front end of the survey as well. Once we get to the buyer profile section and demographic section, we kind of marched the survey instrument down, just like a buyer would go through the journey, like the customer journey. So we start with marketing and then work our way through home features and things like that. So in the marketing section, we look at preferred resources for finding a builder. Since the last study, we've definitely seen an increase in importance of various digital resources being used by buyers, and that makes total sense to me. The pandemic itself has just put a tremendous impact on online shopping, e-commerce. I found some stat, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it said that global e-commerce has jumped to $26.7 trillion now, fueled heavily by the COVID pandemic. So the situation we're in. I know our house is always getting something dropped off on the front porch from somewhere. But again, these digital tools, digital assets are so important when these prospects are out shopping for their new home. So I think personally, we're already heading down a path of digital transformation, but the pandemic definitely accelerated that. I think it brought us forward. Our home building industry, it feels like, got brought forward years in a matter of months back in 2020. So the tools that are being used by builders across Canada now are pretty impressive. So getting into that sort of marketing resource data a little deeper, the CHBA study shows a 6% increase in the use of online research from pre-pandemic data levels. So, again, when we're looking at what first resource are people going to use to find a builder, the digital tools, the online research have increased by 6%. And that online research, that would include things like builders' websites, social media searching, regular search engines, Google stuff, in contrast to the physical discovery of driving out to model homes or driving communities. But interestingly, that still didn't drop off completely. I thought it might fall off even further. It did take its, online research has displaced some of the physical discovery, but nowhere near as much as I thought would happen. So today's buyers still place a lot of importance on being able to crush the carpet, be able to visit model homes or see sales centers, things like that before they make their decisions. Now, having said that, those physical resources have actually dropped off. About the same amount that digital has gone up, about 6.5%. Digging into some of these online resources a little bit further, because I know they're pretty topical right now with builders. What should we be using? Well, 77% of respondents indicate that the internet is a really important resource to find a builder. Kind of makes sense to me, probably 100%. There's 88% that indicate that a builder's website is an important resource to find a builder. So on that note, I think anything that a builder can do to increase your appeal on the internet, to increase engagement on your website, to increase the mobile. Everyone's on mobile now, so having a very mobile friendly website, it should be really a huge focus if it hasn't been already. And now moving to the next, so that's how's a prospect find a builder? Now they found a builder, they've shortlisted builders. What do they use in their final decision-making process? What tools, what resources are important to them? And there's always going to be what I would consider germane resources. To make a purchase decision, I'm going to want to see pricing. I'm going to want to probably see feature sheets or spec sheets. I want to see the floor plans and drawings, things like that. But then we start to see an importance there too of digital tools. So, and again, this makes total sense to me. I was just met with a builder yesterday that they do a lot of their sales online. They do a lot of their decor meetings online, virtual walkthroughs, things like that. So, we have done a pretty major shift to digital. So even as a final resource in their final decision-making process, what we're seeing is online home feature selection tools are up about 4%, 3.6%. So be able to click through and pick your selections, do some of your decor stuff online. That's more important than a year ago. Online interactive floor plans. So whether it's, Matterport videos or virtual tours or whatever, anything that's, really rich content and very interactive that's up 3.5% as well. Some of the other digital assets we see that are important in the final decision-making process include community videos. Again, I mentioned a builder's website, and definitely it showed up again, a mobile-friendly website. So these are important spots because this is where, as consumers today, we spend a lot of time in front of a screen doing our research, doing our buying. Now, the increase, this is kind of an aside beyond data, but the increase in this sort of digital inspiration, discovery, and decision-making, that upstream stuff that used to happen somewhat online, but then, driving out and seeing a model and talking to a sales rep, what we're seeing too is that's also increasing the gap in the importance of online reviews versus word of mouth referrals. So I know as our company's always really tried to help builders improve the referrals and improve their online brand, things like that. What we're seeing in the data is online reviews in 2021, they're now important to 80% of home buyers. What was interesting is word of mouth referrals have actually dropped down. They're still important, but they're only important to 64% of home buyers now. They used to run neck and neck with online reviews back in the day when we launched this study. So I thought it was interesting how word of mouth has taken over word of mouth by a fair margin now. Also with this shift towards online, this online and digital home research and now decision-making too, there seems to be some other cool stuff that showed up in the data. I consider it validation. I call it validation mechanisms, but things that are trending up in importance. One of them was actually design awards. So still kind of a mid-pack item, but this idea that consumers are going to be looking to see, hey, has this builder won the design awards, or is that model or plan won some awards? Again, anything that probably can give some extra street cred to why they should shop with you seems to make a difference. So again, it's seeing some of these other little validation mechanisms creep into the fold now was interesting in the data. And I mentioned it before, but say it again. I think, this idea of a digital transformation, I think, we're finally tipping over maybe towards the end of a pandemic. There's a lot of talk of what's post-pandemic economy and what's post-pandemic consumerism going to look like. Digital's not going away. So this digital transformation, it was underway before the pandemic. It got accelerated by the pandemic, and it's here to stay. And it's just going to get, I think, more rich and robust and things as well. We're hearing from our clients that a lot of buyers want more control in the process as well. So they want to be more interactive. They want to be able to build and price their home online. They want to be able to sort of move it through the sales process further. And again, like I mentioned, into design and decor in more of a self-serve fashion. I don't, personally, I'm maybe old school. I think a lot of it will still be a personal interaction as well. But I think a lot of this early inspiration and discovery, maybe even through to purchase and beyond, will be getting more and more digitized. And it makes sense. I just think, you know, again, these tools are convenient. I can sit at home and build a house and price a house on a Saturday night with my wife while we Netflix and chill. So I think that's not going to necessarily go away. Now, if these home buyers are back in the market, again, we asked them, what would you be looking for? What would your trade-offs be? In the section we call future purchasing considerations. So as a trade-off to make their next home more affordable, the largest segment said they would accept a smaller home. So that was 21% of home buyers, so they would take less square footage. Interestingly, though, this segment actually decreased by nearly 5% since last year. So just in a year, and it doesn't sound like much, but data moves slowly in year-to-year studies like this. So you know, that segment dropping by 5% since last year, to me, that's a pretty big indicator that we're putting a lot more pressure on the space of our homes and more intense use of our homes since the pandemic. Interesting, to the next largest trade-off section or segment would be moving further from work and amenities. So this segment represents 19.9% of buyers in this most recent study. It's increased from 17% in the last study that was fielded before COVID. So that's up, again, 2.93%, which is a big shift in a year-to-year data trend. So interestingly, we see that, you know, there is a considerable segment of buyers that are willing to move further away from work and amenities. You know, the media has been talking about it. We're hearing it from clients. We're hearing it from industry experts. There's a lot more mobility in the market, people willing to move into secondary, tertiary, even rural markets now as we become more and more, you know, virtual learning and telecommuters, remote employees, things like that. As for preferred home types, almost 3 in 4 respondents, about like 3/4, 72%, will be looking for a single detached home for their next home. And interestingly, that has increased by 27.7% since we started the study back in 2015. Why I think that's interesting is we know that, you know, in our industry, you know, we've got this upwards pressure on pricing and availability of single detached product in many markets. I think probably all markets across the country, it seems. So, but the desire is there too. Consumers, that's the product they keep saying they want. So it'll be interesting how we navigate those waters as well to bring the product market fit in alignment. I did this, and it's not really a true story of data, but I thought it's always fun to do. So it's not a realistic way to interpret the story of data, but if I looked at the largest segment, I went through our data set and kind of looked at the largest respondent segments only in, you know, all these different survey questions, and kind of built a house that way. So what would that house be? So if I look at how people responded in the most popular or populous segments of these different questions we asked, and distilled that down, it actually ends up being new construction, because it's desirable to 83% of respondents, so a new home. It would be a single detached 2-story, because that's desirable to 45% of respondents. It would be somewhere between about 2,100 and 2,400 square feet in size, because 16, the biggest segment, 16% of respondents wanted that size home. It would be 4 bedrooms. That was actually desirable to 39% of respondents. It would be 2.5 baths. That's about 1/4 of the people, 26% wanted 2.5 baths in their home. And it might even toss in a legal secondary suite. So that's actually desirable. I'll come to a slide on that, but that's actually desirable to 53% of respondents. Again, that's just a sort of fun way to use the data. It's not surgical by any means, and so don't quote me on any of that stuff. But, you know, this is just sort of the build your house based on the biggest segments idea. But it's also super important that you can drill down, I'll say surgically, with this data to see, you know, again, what home type, what buyer type, what target market, what geo, you can really get in the weeds with that. So I'll leave that as a little sideline story, but it's kind of fun to do that each year with the data. And that segues into this new question that I mentioned, this idea of a legal secondary suite in the home. It was a new question we added for 2021 to the study or to the survey. What was interesting is over half of the respondents indicated that they're interested in having a legal secondary suite in their next home, over half. So that did surprise me. I know it's popular. I know it's, you know, we see it and hear it a lot. And so we do dig a little deeper into that as what's their motivation. So what we see is, a large segment of this group, about 15%, would be hoping to use it for a long-term rental. There's about 10% that say they'd be using it for aging family members. We've got 11% that said they'd be looking to have a legal secondary suite for aging family members that also want that to have accessibility features. So we did split the aging family members into two little buckets there. So you put the two together and we have about 21.3% of buyers noting the reason for that secondary suite would be for aging family members, whether it's accessible features or not accessible features in it. They said there's also about 10%, 9.9%, that are looking for a legal secondary suite for their children. Something actually we're considering right now. It's hard to get. We've got 4 children between the two of us, and the younger ones, it's going to be hard for them to figure out how to get in the market. So anything you can do to get innovative with housing solutions, and legal secondary suites tend to be pretty popular right now. And on that note too, and the question we've had on the study for a while, it's not not a full legal secondary suite. It's a different question we've had in the study that allows us to kind of trend longer than this new one we just added, but it is the idea of a second primary suite. So not a legal accessory apartment, but a second primary suite in the home. I always like tracking that one as well, because it seems to be unique to our study. And what we see is that second primary suites have climbed by 8% or 8 points since 2015. It's actually one of the largest gainers. We talk about losers and gainers in the study, but that's actually one of the largest gainers in the study. It's still only, finishing mid-pack when you look at an overall ranking list of the data, but it is a must-have or a really want feature to 43% of home buyers in the most recent study. And so when we ask any of these preference questions, we ask, is it must-have, is it really nice, or is it must-have, really want, nice if affordable, or not important at all? So we use a 4-point scale. And we put a qualitative label with each one too, so they can't mess it up too much. But a second primary suite is a must-have or a really want feature to 43% of new home buyers, which to me, again, it's not a full rental scenario like a legal secondary suite might be, but it is a bit of an indicator question to me that shows or points to these different or changing forms of home ownership or household occupancy arrangements that we're seeing. I think, even in my own neighborhood, we're seeing more and more multi-generational living scenarios. We're seeing co-ownership arrangements emerge. The fintech industry and the prop tech sectors of the market are introducing things like fractional ownership. There's a couple companies in Canada now that are looking at fractional ownership concepts that allow, again, investors to have some ownership in real estate, participate, have a stake in the sector, beyond traditional like REITs and things like that, or co-ownership and things like that. But again, trying to become innovative with how people can be participating in the real estate market somehow. So to me, data from whether it's the accessory apartment question or legal secondary suite, I should say, or the second primary suite in a home, to me, what it does do is it points to this idea or concept of home. It might be going through, it's a cliche word, I think maybe, but a paradigm shift on how consumers are trying to navigate things. And that could be things like affordability issues or trying to deal with multi-generational living situations. I've got aging parents and I've got children that can't move out. I'm right smack dab in that scenario. Aging in place scenarios, same thing. I want to stay at my home longer and don't want to end up on a long-term care home until the last possible minute. How can I age in place? Things like that. How can I find unique home solutions for that? Again, I mentioned unique ways to participate in the real estate ownership or stake in the real estate market somehow, or navigating any or all of the above there. But it's just interesting to me that I think this concept of home is going through a bit of a paradigm shift, and it's going to be interesting to see. I think COVID's maybe accelerated that or changed it up a little bit, but it's going to be interesting to watch how that tracks out over the next few years. I don't know if we have any questions. If Andy, or I don't know if Steph made it back on, but if there are any questions, feel free to jump in, Andy, and let me know. I can't watch the chat pod on the screen, it seems. So
I managed to get back on, so I apologize for
there you are.
I kind of disappeared there, so my apologies for that. We actually did have a question, and so timing to ask on that front. So the question is the second primary suite a financial need or a feature wanted by some cultural groups?
Oh boy, that's where I'd be lying if I gave an answer on the spot. But in the tool itself that comes with the reporting, you can actually dig down and start to look if, and start dicing and slicing by different fields. So you can start to look and see who wants the second primary suite.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is, I think, the way I would use the data. I haven't looked it up, so I'd be lying to say I know, but it would be, you could find factoids and data to support what age cohort wants it, what home type they wanted it, and things like that, what the motivation is as well. But I had to do some digging. So if somebody wants to shoot a message or email too, I could look that up though.
Okay, so it says anonymous, so I don't know who it is. So if they can maybe send us a message in the chat, or respond in an email, then Tim can do a bit of digging on that. I'm actually curious. So that was the one question, and I'm curious because I happen to know somebody who would identify as Canadian, had multiple generations living here, who they would be probably on the borderline of Gen X and millennial as far as age, young family, and are doing this exact thing with the parents so we're seeing kind of a cross section. I think of a lot of the different people are moving in this way. Another question that came in was, are city planners included in this information? So I don't know if you have any insights into that, because that is a big impact on secondary suites.
They wouldn't be invited to participate in the survey itself because it's new home. But there's actually quite a few city planners that get this study though, that actually are involved and interested in sitting in webinars like this, or the CHBA ones I do. And across back in the old days when we used to be able to travel, I'd have planners actually in the audience and things like that too, which was interesting. So the data is definitely used by planners or interested, and that's again a reason why I think why CHBA originally launched this market research study, is to try and allow planners, things like that, to make data-driven decisions. So, well,
and the other thing too is because CHBA now distributes it at no charge to the membership. The membership could always take it to their planners as well, right?
100%, yeah. Because I think there are that's a whole other webinar, whether our planning, density-driven planning mandates match the direction of what consumers want to. But I think having these data discussions is great with planners, again, with government, Queen's Park, and the feds, and everywhere.
Tim, is that a service that you as Avid offer to do deeper data analysis or data mining, or do you sell the data, or could you make it available to, let's say, Waterloo Region or City of Hamilton to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we partner with CHBA. I'd bounce it off them. I don't think that if any trouble sharing the data, and then it's all mineable data, so that would be something. I have talked to Niagara Region about it before and done some data work on it. So.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, interesting.
Definitely. That's what it's all for.
We could throw the question out to the audience. If they know somebody, or they themselves or whatever are doing something like a secondary suite, or they know somebody that's doing a secondary suite, we can have them raise their hands.
Oh, true.
There you go. Out of 85.
Who do we got? Audience, let us know if you know of anybody, or you yourself are considering secondary suites. See just a couple of hands right at the moment.
It's also this is always a good way to check who's paying attention.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, I see more coming in.
I love it.
Okay, well, they can continue to raise their hands as you move on.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will move on. Good spot to sort of break there, but the next one I have up on screen here is the top 10 the top 10 list. So when we get into the home features and design section of the study, it's a big section of the survey itself. We don't, again, I've mentioned this in past presentations, we don't see a lot of shuffling or a lot of change in the top 10 list. We do see some shuffling for pole position, I would call it, every year. So on screen right now is the top 10 list for the 2021 study. So high efficiency windows, I won't read them all off, but overall energy efficient appliances, energy efficient homes. So you can see, top 3 items, a strong desire for energy efficient things. Then we get into some storage stuff when we get into walk-in closets, slip down a few spots from last year, but still really important to today's home buyers. Further below in the same storage theme, linen closets are number 8 spot. And also we see in the storage as well, kitchen island and pantry as well. But we're going to dig into the kitchen in a bit more detail today. So we've also seen HRV, ERV hitting the top 10 list. I think that's interesting because I think, again, while we're spending more time at home, probably indoor air quality has become more topical and more relevant as well. Open concept kitchen, of course, makes the list. Linen closets, I mentioned above. Two-car garage. So this one's interesting as well. That's partly storage. It secured number 9 spot this year, and it's made the top 10 list before and fallen off into spot 11 and 12 in the past years as well. But I think this is going to be one to watch as well, because if this mobile market we're in is moving off from downtown transit-oriented stuff and moving into suburbs or secondary or tertiary or even rural markets, that takes vehicles. And so where do we put them all? So I'm interested to see how this evolves over time. And then rounding out the list is large windows. So again, we want our connection. We want to, we don't want to just have high efficiency windows. We want big windows. And that's always a fun play, the one against the other sometimes as well. So knowing the preferences of today's home buyers and where they will and won't spend money is a pretty important piece of the puzzle, I think, for the building industry and the renovation business as well. And these preferences are changing. We see this, they change every year. We see changes in the data. So even the year-over-year change for the graph on screen right now provides some pretty interesting insight on the shifts that we've seen since the last year of this study in 2020. So now, this is where sometimes evolving the survey instrument, blurs things a little. We did add 2 extra answer set options to this question. So you can't do a bang on sort of apples to apples comparison here. We now have aging in place and improved indoor air quality as answer set options on this question. But just as a rough indicator or comparison, if a home buyer has an additional $10,000 to spend in their next home, what do they value most? How are they going to spend that money? And just taking a quick look at how this has changed since pre-pandemic data. First off, we see that the segment that said they spend money on interior finishes and options, it's actually shrunk from 30% down to 25%. The segment that said they would spend that extra money on energy efficiency has shrunk from 16% down to 12%. And the segment that said they would spend that money to be closer to work and amenities, that has shrunk from 6% to 3%. So we are seeing some movement in the data there. And again, you can't do a dead on apples to apples comparison because we gave them a couple extra answer options to choose from. On the opposite side, some of the things that have grown, segments that have grown, the group that is looking for a larger lot, or that segment, is increased from 13% to almost 16% now. And the segment that would spend money on a larger home, more square footage, is actually increased a percent or so as well. So it's just interesting to see that, as we're spending more time at home, we want a bigger home and maybe a bigger lot too. And that, again, is not a total shock to me. We're seeing in other parts of the data set as well. But moving further and away from work and amenities, we're hearing that in the news. We're seeing that hot markets, sometimes in a hot market or a bustling market with escalating prices, energy efficiency is a bit of a tougher sell. I think maybe more consumers expected to be included. It can be interpreted different ways. Interior finishes often get traded off to try and figure out how to navigate affordability there as well. So lots of ways you can see the data forming a story here. But this is, again, just really broad stroke interpretations. I'll say it again, the best thing is to get into the data and play around and drill down, and we've made it super easy to sort by and filter by fields. Now, just jumping into a little deeper on the interior features, different areas. This is a big section. Instead of doing a top 10, or I did a top 5 list. I just got random, and let's do a top 5 list on interior features. So most important interior features to today's home buyers, we've got the walk-in closet, linen closets. So you can see the theme of storage. We've got large windows, structured wiring. So it's kind of smart structured of the home for when it comes to being tech enabled, and upstairs laundry. So, but then beyond that, just looking at some of the other data in the study, we're seeing an increase in importance in this concept of rooms, I would say. And I think that directly attributes to the fact that, again, we're increasing the pressure on the home, the stress of the home, more people in the home more often, more pressure on the spaces that are in the home, possibly trying to find ways to get away from each other so there's less homicides. I don't know. There's a lot of people in the home trying to work and school and pets and everything else. So we have put our homes to the test like never before. Our lockdown lifestyle has our homes being our offices, being our gyms, being our schools and daycares, being our restaurants, dance studios for my daughters back when they were dancing at the start of the pandemic, and more depending on your family situation. So this concept of rooms seems to be more and more important. On that note, we're seeing that dining room and living rooms have both increased in importance since last year of the study. And it's actually a trend. These formal rooms have been trending up, still mid-pack items, but have been trending up right from the start of this study in 2015. Just to put some numbers to that, formal dining rooms are up 4% since last year. They are now a must-have or a really want feature to about 47% of respondents. Formal living rooms they've also increased by about 7% since last year. So the desire for a formal living room, and formal living rooms actually came in as one of the largest gainers this year, one of the largest gaining items this year. Moving on to home office, no surprise there. It has increased in importance since pre-pandemic. Again, with more remote workers and online learners. And I think, again, home spaces are filled with telecommuters and students right now. So the home office, most recent data says 63.2% say that a home office is a must-have or a really want feature. And that's up 3% since last year. Interestingly, I followed the same study that's conducted, or a similar study gets conducted south of the border. NAHB, the National Association of Home Builders, they do a similar study every year. They call it What Homebuyers Really Want. And they actually came out with the exact same number. So we had 63.2% say a home office is an important feature. They were 63%. So I always think it's interesting. It validates, we're different enough from our southern neighbors, but there's so many similarities. So I always like double checking some of the data to see where the similar aspects are. Getting a bit deeper into some of the areas and interior features, I thought we'd dig into the kitchen a little bit here. We saw on the top 10 list, several of the top 10 items were related to the kitchen. So things like the energy efficient appliances, kitchen islands made the top 10, open concept kitchens as well. We had a side note for kitchens. Number 4 item was walk-in pantries. So I mentioned this theme towards storage. So we're seeing walk-in pantries just missed sort of that top 3 list on the kitchen area. I finished number 16 overall in the study. So again, storage is pretty important. I think, again, as more of us are at home more often, probably cooking more than we've ever done before too, with, again, restaurants being closed, at least in Ontario right now. I think we're all using our kitchens more than ever before. So anything that builders can do to really, I would say, design chef-inspired kitchens ready for this pandemic surge of bread making, as home sourdough is, all that stuff is going to be attractive to today's home buyers because we're spending a lot of time in our homes and instead of restaurants. Moving along to another super important room in the house, the primary suite. I wanted to jump into just kind of the top items in the primary suite as well. Highest ranked feature we had was walk-in closets. So nothing super sexy there. They want their walk-in closets in the primary suite. They want double sinks. So that came in as number 2, and then the oversized showers as well. But they've actually slipped down about 3% since last year, which I always think is interesting because oversized showers slip down and they don't want tubs. So I always joke that I don't know where Canadians bathe anymore, but maybe we're just staying in our pajamas all the time. But yeah, oversized showers have slipped down a little bit. The next most important item when it comes to a primary suite, number 4 came in, was having a main floor primary suite. It's actually a must-have or a really wanted feature to 52% of buyers. When you actually segment that data by age cohort, though, it was interesting. That jumps up to 67% when you look at the baby boom cohort. So again, an area where we can jump in and look and dice and slice the data more specific to a target market. Tubs continue to decline. I mentioned that whether it's a soaker tub's still more important than Whirlpool tub. But again, the caveat here is when I started looking at this data in more detail, it does depend on the home type. So, having a tub is more important if you're looking at, a customer luxury build versus an entry-level product. It also tends to vary based on the price of the home. The higher the price point, the more the importance of the tubs go up. So even though broad strokes says tubs are on the decline, it's not necessarily the case when you dig in deeper to the layers of the data. Now, moving on to another area that I think is pretty key to the study and a pretty big section of the survey itself is this idea of energy efficiency and sustainability. This is the second highest scoring survey category, I would call it. It falls in right behind kitchen. So when we look at the sort of segments of the survey, energy efficiency and sustainability falls right in behind the kitchen. Having said that, we saw the tendency to spend money on it is also marginally drop. And so is this overall score of energy efficiency and sustainability as a group of questions in the study. It's dropped down marginally over the past couple of years. It's super important to consumers. We're seeing that however many in the top 10 list, 4 or 5 items would have related to energy efficiency on that top 10 list overall. So when we dig into just a specific section of the study, most important features are high efficiency windows, followed by an overall energy efficient home. Rounding out the third position was actually the HRV or the ERV, some sort of an air exchange system. Like I mentioned, all 3 of these placed in the top 10 list overall when it comes to home features. Coming in 4th spot this year is certification by an independent third-party rating system. 50% of buyers say that certification by a third-party rating system is a must-have feature. So that would be labels like Energy Star or EnerGuide or Net Zero or whatever it might be, depending on the province in play here. But 78% of respondents are saying that certification by a third-party rating system is in the top 2 buckets, either must have or a really want feature. So it is a really desirable attribute to today's homebuyers. And then digging just a bit deeper into this section, again, you could almost do a full webinar on just every one of the sections of the survey, but digging a bit deeper on this energy efficiency and sustainability section, the largest segment of buyers, about 46%, state that their motivation to invest in energy efficient features is lower utility costs. So I know we fight against that as an industry. You know, there's so many other benefits to energy efficient design and construction. It seems like consumers still equate it to dollars and cents. But this segment, having said that, this segment has been shrinking. So it's shrinking from 53% last year. Looking back, it was 60% of home buyers back 5 years ago. So we are seeing that the motivation to incorporate energy efficient design and sustainable features has been changing. We're now up to 22% that state they're motivated by protection of the environment. That segment's been growing. It was 21% last year. If you look further back, it was 14.6% 5 years ago, back when we actually added that question to the study. So we are seeing, again, this motivation for energy efficiency, or the reasoning behind it with today's home buyers, are shifting as we see the data story unfold year after year. But since a large proportion, a large segment do equate energy efficiency versus utility cost spend, I did want to pull in a bit of data that looks at that sort of nexus between the two, the connection between utility costs and if they put their money where their mouth is or not. So what we're seeing is about 49% of buyers indicated they were willing to spend up to an additional $5,000 on their next home upfront if it would reduce their utility costs by $100 a month or $1,200 a year. Interestingly, not to jump to the south of the border, but I compared our Canadian findings against similar data in the NAHB study on the US side. And the NAHB study shows 57% of buyers are willing to pay $5,000 or more on top of the purchase price of their next home in order to save $1,000 per year in utility costs. So, the numbers are pretty congruent what we're finding on this side of the border, what the US is finding in their study as well. I always think that's validating as well, since it's too big. They have a big research think tank at NAHB as well. Now, we also asked that question in a different format. We asked them in terms of a monthly mortgage payment, how much more would you be willing to accept if you could save $100 per month in utilities? What we're seeing in that question is the breakdown looks like 31% of home buyers said they were willing to, they'd be doing a break even, and they'll spend an extra 100 if you'll save them $100 a month on utilities. We've got 44% looking for a return on investment this year, so they don't want to spend the full $100. If they could save the 100, they want a bit of an ROI from that. We've got 25% that say they would invest beyond their expected return. So willing to spend more than that $100 per month extra on their mortgage, even if it only gains them $100 per month in utility cost savings. Another section of the survey that we added, this was added about 3 years ago now, 2018, 3 years ago, was an area for smart home features. So getting more and more popular, more and more common. Smart tech industry is everywhere. So I wanted to highlight some of the key things we're finding in this section. The most important smart home features, Wi-Fi thermostats are the most popular It's 84.4% of home buyers say that these are a must-have or a really want feature. It's actually one of the largest gainers in importance as well since last year. So, and these smart thermostats are, they're not only about convenience, they're also about, opportunities for energy savings, seeing how your home is performing, how you're using your home, things like that. So, that angle is something we see in the data, this recurring theme of importance around energy efficiency with today's home buyers. So I think that's why my interpretation would be that's why we're seeing the Wi-Fi thermostat or smart thermostats so high up here as a smart home feature. Smart home lighting is in second spot. And then security. Security systems come in number 3 when it comes to sort of the smart tech area. Some of the other questions that don't resonate as much, or some of the other features, we asked about voice automation, we asked about electronic entry systems, still ranking lower right now in the study. They kind of fall into the might be nice if affordable bucket. But as a little aside, I think personally the smart home features in general might be a huge benefit to our industry as homes and home systems are getting more and more complicated. These smart home features really simplify. They make it convenient. They help owners to really operate their homes more efficiently and effectively. So I'm just prognosticating, I think, but I think these could be a big help to our industry to help consumers monitor and measure and take better care of their homes. Another section I wanted to touch on, this is new this year as well. The aging in place idea, this idea of having aging in place features in a new home. This was just added to the survey instrument this past year. So this is all fresh data. There's no trend lines available yet, but it's all data points that we're collecting that we're going to build from. Right now, what we're seeing is 77.8% of baby boomers indicate that they're looking for aging in place features, either for themselves or for family members. Interestingly, when I actually expanded that data out to all age cohorts, it's still really important. It's still 55.8% of all home buyers that are looking for aging in place features. So, across all cohorts, super important across boomers and even my generation, Gen X, we just keep seeing that rising up as well. Looking at, will they pay money for that? We've got 70% of respondents say they're willing to spend more on features that will help them age in place. So I thought that was interesting. 70% will put their money where their mouth is on aging in place features. 56% of respondents indicate that they'll be looking for aging in place features in their next home, either for themselves or for a family member. And then as for timing, we had about 60%, 59% of respondents said that they won't need these features for 10 years or more. But interestingly, there's almost a quarter, like 23%, indicating they want them immediately to within the next 5 years. So almost 1 in 4 buyers are going to be looking for having some sort of aging in place features in place within the next 5 years. Now, when we get into the actual features related to aging in place, we kind of do the most popular features or the most desirable features. Number 1 was a primary suite, including a full bathroom on the main floor. That is the most sought after feature in this section of the survey. That's actually a must-have or a really want feature to 52% of home buyers. The next most important feature or most desirable feature was wide doorways and hallways. So that was what 55% of respondents are saying that's must-have or that's a really wanted feature. Rounding out the number 3rd spot was easy grip handles. So again, that's what 43% of respondents put those easy grip handles in the top 2 buckets or the top 2 ratings. Some of the other features we ask about on the study now in that section, just so you're aware, we get into things like stairless or stepless entries, grab bars in the bathrooms. We have curbless entries and curbless showers, things like that as well. So this is definitely an interesting section of the survey to dig into in more detail by both age cohort, I think, I'd recommend, also by home type. I think this idea of the willingness to spend money on aging in place features actually jumps up from 69.7% of respondents to 85% just by breaking it down by cohort instead of the whole cohort, just looking at baby boomers alone. So it's a great example of where you can dig into the data more specifically to your target market, whether that's, again, an age demographic cohort, a home type, a geographic location, maybe an income level, or you can multi-filter it, combination of any or all of those factors. And by adding this sort of aging in place, it naturally seemed like a fit to get into some other convenience features as well. So I mentioned we added a few other questions, whether, they might be luxury features, they might be convenience features, but does it, tags onto the aging in place section of the survey. Most of the data that showed up tended to be very, I would again call it mid-pack, kind of middle of a question ranking list if you had to put them in order. But what we see in this new section when it comes to convenience or luxury features, motion sensor lights, these were kind of the most popular, most desirable. It's a must-have or a really wanted feature to almost half of them folks, so 47%. We asked about snow melt for the driveways and the stairs. That's a must-have feature. I'd love to have that. Our driveway is all I see today. This is a must-have or a really want feature to 39% of buyers. And then the other one, the sort of the rounding out the third pole position here was the master all-off light switch, which it came in at a must-have or a really want feature for, again, about 38% of buyers. So these are, again, sort of more in the bucket of what might be nice if affordable. They don't get real high into the must-have yet, but I think it's interesting to have these on the study to, again, build up some data, start to see trends emerge in this new sort of convenience and luxury section. Now, jumping from inside to outside, shifting to the outside of the home, some of the most preferred exterior features to today's home buyers. I mentioned, it made the top 10 list, but the 2-car garage. So again, in light of the data that we're seeing in the media that we're hearing about people moving further away from urban areas into the suburbs, into the rural markets, wherever it might be, changing provinces, this is likely going to increase the need for vehicles, put more pressure on parking configurations, garage spaces, things like that. So when it comes to an exterior features section, we're always torn whether garages are exterior or interior. We have them in the exterior section of the survey, but that was the highest preferred feature in the exterior section. It was a 2-car garage. Coming in number 2 spot was stone exterior. That as an exterior feature came in as second, and then right behind that was brick. So having a brick exterior, and that has actually been one of the top 10. And when we do the gainers losers calculations, that has been one of the top 10 gainers in the study since we launched in 2015. So brick, and again, there's so many great products out there, whether it's full brick, whether it's full stone, whether it's veneered products, cultured, whatever it might be. But again, the consumers typically are indicating they want to have some of that heavier look of a stone or a brick facade on their homes. One of the new questions that we also added, and it again could be inside the home, could be outside the home, because it's usually in the garage. We put it in the exterior section, but we did add a question about the importance of electrical vehicle chargers. And what we're seeing in this, again, it'd be nice to see a trend emerge on this over time. This is new this year. What we're seeing in the first data is an electrical vehicle charger is a must-have feature to about 22.3% of home buyers. It shakes out as about 40% placed it in the top 2 bars. So must-have or really want. So it's definitely of importance to a big chunk of today's consumers. And again, I expect more and more continued upward trend on that as the auto industry is continually evolving towards more electric vehicles for the general market. And while we're outside the home, there's also the whole idea of outdoor lifestyle here. So another area where today's homebuyers have spent a lot of time during the pandemic is this focus on outdoor lifestyle. So this has been increasingly important during our 19 months of staycationing. So I know pool companies face it, fencing companies. I've got several friends that are in the landscape contracting business, and they've all been running full out, just trying to keep up with demand. Because outdoor lifestyle has become so important, since again we're probably reallocating budgets that maybe were used for travel, whatever it might be. I'd be speculating, but we're spending a lot more time on our properties. So when we look at the outdoor lifestyle or outdoor living questions in the survey, pardon me, number 1 feature is privacy fence. So this feature is a must-have to 46% of respondents. Overall, I broke that one down just by the single detached segment, and it's 50%. So every other 1 and 2 want to have their lot fenced. The next most important feature in that outdoor living area is actually an outdoor living space. So whether it's patios, whether it's gazebos, whatever it might be, but that's actually increased in importance since last year as well. Coming in third in the outdoor living feature area is the covered patio or deck. So, and that also has jumped up since last year in importance. So we're seeing, again, this outdoor lifestyle is pretty prevalent since we're, again, spending more time at home. We also noticed an uptick in the importance of an outdoor bar / eating area. So it didn't make the podium for the top 3 above there on screen, but it's definitely an important feature when you look at their outdoor lifestyle. And in general, when you, again, versus kitchen versus primary suite versus energy efficiency. If you look at a question ranking of everything on the study, outdoor living features tend to be mid-pack items here, but they are definitely some features that are important to home buyers, that they're on the wish list of home buyers, that will be topical. So just again, we're spending more time at home. We're learning to garden apparently. We've got 3 new gardens in our backyard since the pandemic broke out. So we're homesteading apparently, but this is that's outdoor, the idea of, we know consumers are looking for larger homes, larger lots, and the larger lot idea might lead right into this, the better outdoor lifestyle. Now, an area that I was extra curious to see how it was going to shake out in this year's study is this idea of proximity preferences. What do they want to live close to? What are today's consumers, what's important to them? There's so much media attention around, exiting the city, exiting the core, abandoning urban central to move into, again, secondary, tertiary, rural markets, maybe completely picking up, as I mentioned, and jumping. I know several friends that have left the province and moved to totally different areas. So I think this section of the survey is likely seen, or section of the data is likely seeing some of the most year-over-year impact when it comes to sort of proximity of what do these folks want to live near when it comes to amenities. Some of the decliners that we're seeing in this section, declining is the proximity to downtown, proximity to public transit, proximity to work, proximity to airport, and that would affect me a lot. It doesn't matter as much if I'm within an hour of an airport. I don't fly as much anymore. But these are some things. People are moving further away from amenities. It might be tied to affordability. It might be tied to the idea of, drive it until you can afford it, that mindset. The 2021 data does show, I mentioned before, 20% of respondents said they would move further away to, accept a location further away from work and amenities if it helped make their next home more affordable. So 1 in 5 are saying, they would move further away from their jobs, from amenities. And that segment's actually grown by 3% since last year. The inset graph, we have a question on the survey, which I thought was interesting too, about, do you want to purchase in your same community? I thought these kind of tied in together interestingly. The desire to purchase a home in the same communities also decreased. It's gone down by 7.6% since last year. So again, data shifts don't sound big, but from a year to year, those are pretty big movements. So in that lower graph, we're seeing that propensity to want to stay in your same community has actually fallen off as well. So I would say in general, the data we're seeing in this proximity section of the study seems to align with the notion and media attention around the fact that there's definitely more mobility in the market since the pandemic, and there is a propensity for people to be okay with moving a little bit further away. So we'll see how, again, post-pandemic economy, post-pandemic habits and patterns shift, but right now that the data reinforces what we've been hearing and seeing in the media. While we're outside as well, community features tie in with the proximity features. So, the most desired community features, they haven't changed since year 1 of the study. Number 1 is walking and cycling paths. These are a must-have feature to over half of respondents. Combined must-have, really want together, make up 86% of home buyers. So we want to live in communities that have walking and cycling paths. I know our community, I live an hour west of Toronto. We've been putting more and more walking and cycling paths in over the past 5 or 6 years. I love it. People love it. Everyone's out on them all the time, especially during a pandemic. It's one thing you can still do. So number 2 item when it comes to community features is parks and rec centers. When I drill down further into the data on this one, it shows that parks and rec centers are most important to the Gen X and the millennials when you look at it in terms of age cohorts. And then rounding out the 3rd position when it comes to community features is the overall community landscaping. Now, we do have several other questions, a couple of the lower ranking questions in this section. One was dog parks and the other was ice rinks. So just a couple lower scoring ones in this section. But in general, I think, this shift towards suburbs, even out into other markets, regardless of where today's home buyers are choosing to call home, there is, again, this tendency or this desire they want to live in attractive landscape communities. They want walkable or rideable communities, and communities that accommodate or nurture an active lifestyle. So even if those communities are further away from work or further away from urban cores or large metro areas right now. So as we get close, I want to leave a bit of time at the end for some wrap up and Q&A. So as we're getting closer here to wrapping up some of these data points and slides, you know, I thought it'd be fun to put up what don't people want. You know, that's I've been in the industry since I was 15. It feels to me, I get jaded sometimes thinking, yeah, but home buyers want everything. What don't they want? So, you know, I thought I'd put up the bottom 10 list, and we had the top 10 list earlier. So, you know, knowing what home buyers don't want is just as important as knowing what they do want, because we don't want to be spending money as builders and developers on areas that home buyers don't value. You know, that's just bad for business, bad for the bottom line. So this slide we're seeing is, you know, when I did the question ranking list, top to bottom, these were the items that sort of finish at the bottom of the list. You can see a couple of them relate to countertops. So we see laminate finishing low. We see, you know, solid surface countertops. Those would be more like the acrylics, not granite and quartz, because quartz and granite definitely are still scoring really high. A couple items related to exterior finishes. So the idea of full stuccoed home or full vinyl sided home scores low. A few parking configurations that also are at the bottom of the list. So the idea of having no garage or open parking, you know, even a single garage ranks low. And then at the other end of the garage spectrum, we see, you know, behemoth 4+ car garages are ranking low as well. We also see some other low ranking features making a list, including things, you know, like a hobby games room, like the whirlpool tub is at the bottom of the pack. So primary suite whirlpool tub as well. And there are so many other, so what we've touched on today is just, again, high level highlights, mainly at a national level, because I knew the audience today was going to be distributed across the country. You know, a lot of participants on here from Ontario, but it's great to see, you know, builders and participants from all over the place. So I did keep it at a national level data that we're presenting here. There's over 200 survey questions. When you divide them up into numerous sections, it's impossible to touch on everything, you know, in one webinar. But, you know, each of the areas that we covered today, you can look at it in more detail. You can drill into it in more detail when you get into the full reporting. And there were several areas that I couldn't even get to, that I didn't even touch on. We do touch on, they're not big areas in the study, but we do touch on, you know, construction systems. Are they interested in wood framed or ICF? We talk about power generation. Are they interested in solar thermal, solar PV, things like that? We touch on insulation. You know, what type of insulation do they like? Do they want it insulated beyond code? We ask about specific questions for gated or age-restricted communities. So if it's an adult lifestyle community, we have questions related to that as well. And similarly, we ask about mid-rise and high-rise amenities. So if the buyer is taking the survey, we're looking for a mid-rise or high-rise product, what amenities do they want in that as well? So I guess summarize, there's no shortage of data in the Homebuyer Preference Study, especially after 7 years of conducting this. But I also think there's no more important time than ever before to be leveraging data in these crazy times we're in. I mentioned it in the CHBA webinar, but there's an old saying that without data, you're just an opinion. And if we're all going to just have an opinion, we may as well use mine. So, but I guess in all seriousness, I think data-driven decisions are the key to every successful business. You got to have intuition, you got to have innovation, but data-backed decisions really help. And there's just a ton of data on Canadian new home buyers in this study. Having said that, it's just one source of data, or just one tool to have in your toolbox. Just like the industry I grew up in, you know, this is an extremely important tool, but it's got to be used alongside other tools. And those could be like population forecast data, you know, absorption rate data, commodity price indexes, lumber is up and down all over the map, the interest rate data, economic projection data. There's just so many tools as builders, developers, industry folks that we can have at our, you know, in our toolboxes, and knowing when to use the right tool for the right job is, again, super important. I think that drives a lot of successful businesses today. So I'm going to wrap with that. Quick final note, you know, as Stephanie mentioned, you know, additional value for memberships for anybody who's a CHBA member or CHBA and Avid. Loved, you know, early on, this was a report that was made available for sale. There's just so much good stuff and it's good data in this report that actually CHBA and Avid agreed to, let's just get this out to members for free. So it's available complimentary to all CHBA member organizations. I did put the link on screen here. You can get it from the CHBA website. You can, you know, register there to get your copy. So I'm going to wrap with that, see if we have any other questions.
Yeah, we did have a handful of questions, and thank you so much, Tim. That was very enlightening. And I always find it fascinating just to hear all the things that people want, the shifts, even small shifts over the course of the years. I've been following this work, well, right from day one, actually. So it's pretty exciting stuff. So we did have a couple of questions that came in. And so the first one was referencing back to the top 10 home features that people do want.
Okay.
Was there anything that surprised you that, say, didn't make it on the list?
Didn't make it on the
did or didn't make it
did
on
or
the list?
didn't make it on the list?
Yeah.
I'd love to say yes, but no, because it doesn't change much year to year. It seems like the same three themes emerge, and I think they do kind of make sense. You know, the homes are bigger energy, probably the biggest energy using device in our world, and so having a theme towards energy efficiency, anything that relates to that, makes sense. Storage for sure, but that's just very personal to me because we have so much gear. And then also the kitchen thing, a little bit interesting, the 2-car garage. I wasn't surprised by it, but seeing the 2-car garage pop up into like 8th spot or whatever that was, because that was actually trending down prior to COVID. Like, it was still an important feature, but it seemed to be slipping, and all of a sudden it popped right back up. It reinforced what I thought, but it was still kind of like, oh yeah, I guess we're driving more. We're moving further away, that we need more vehicles possibly now.
Right. Yeah, that's true. When we do have to do the driving.
For the few times we have to drive.
Yeah, that's right. Another question, there's several people asked kind of related questions. And so they were kind of in the Q&A and in the chat. So I'll try to.
Okay.
It was around the third-party labeling. So you know how you talked about the importance of third-party labeling. And I know that one has always kind of either been on the top 10 or just hovered right at the edge of it. And so their question is really around the specific labels, such as Energy Star, such as LEED or Net Zero. Like, do you actually specify those labels, or do you have any sense of what, are there ones that are more popular than others? Or any sort of detail you can clarify with regards to that?
We don't. What we do, we try to stay pretty agnostic to the labeling.
Okay.
So on the survey question itself, in brackets at the end of the question, we say certification by an independent third party, and then we kind of encapsulate the different options or what we mean by that. So we do list EnerGuide, Energy Star, Net Zero. I think we have LEED in there as well. So we don't actually specify a label per se. We try to stay pretty agnostic there. We might call that, it's an interesting question though. And actually I noticed that NAHB on the US side actually calls out different labels now. But out west, it was built, since it's a national study, there was built green out west, and you had different labeling by province that was more prevalent. NAHB, just since our data parallels the US sometimes, Energy Star is the one that everyone, that NAHB, I was reading their report, and it's Energy Star. That's the consumer recognized label. I don't want to stick my neck out and say it's identical for Canada, but my assumption would be if it's that way down there, it would probably be similar here as well. But I think Net Zero, it all comes down to marketing too. I think Net Zero, once it gets more, years under its belt and more consumer awareness, so much of this is marketing too, right? It's a newer label, so it's Energy Star is different too, because we'll see it on our washer or dryer, and we'll see it on our computer monitors, and it's just got, it's a brand that's almost as big as Nike sometimes, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. It does have incredible reach and recognition. Seems that Gord Cook had given the number at one point in time. It was like way up there, 80-90% recognition, kind of somewhere in that range. That's huge brand recognition.
That was 82.
82%. Okay, yeah.
Hey, Steph, can you turn my camera on real quick there? Thanks.
Let me see if I can do that. I will ask you to start your video. So
Awesome,
I've just sent you a request, so there you go.
I love the hand up. I love the hand up on Zoom too. And you see Andy's hand up.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you weren't able to. So that's always learning something new about this software. So a couple of other questions that came in were, here's a couple specific ones. They would want to know what the benefit of the double sink is. So I think that was in the bathroom section, if I'm not mistaken.
For sure. Yeah, benefit wise, we wouldn't get into, like, we have preference, we don't ask benefit. There's so many ways we could take this, because you could ask, we're a 190 question survey, and you can make it all of us on a 3,000 question survey. When I dice and slice that data, it's most important to the younger buyers. So having the double sinks. So my gut feel on that, then I would interpret that to mean possibly a busier lifestyle, more work and children and all those commitments. So, it gets you out of the way of your partner, or lets your kid brush their teeth beside you, or whatever it might be. It's probably just high functioning, because it does tend to be like the younger the age cohort, the more important the double sinks were.
Mm-hmm. One other question I know we had talked about in the past, and I'm not sure if you have this information or could even add it. In talking to many builders, they're talking about an increase in investors buying their products versus home buyers. And so one question is, do you know if investors are answering this survey versus, say, home buyers? Because that could skew different answers.
It does. And actually, it's something I did look at. We can actually, it wouldn't be for the existing. So these are people, when they're back in market, if they'd be purchasing for an investment, we can get that data filtered by that. So that would be the closest we can get. But if they're saying, yeah, I'm going to be back in market to purchase an investment property, you can click on that field or filter, and then the data will populate based on how they're answering for that, which is kind of interesting because I think you and I, Steph, might have been talking about, some of them say, I don't care about energy efficiency as much because I'm an investor buyer. I'll double check that. I'm pretty sure that actually was the opposite. It actually mattered more to them.
That's interesting. So anecdotally, information that I was getting from builders was that they actually had they were looking at more kind of getting the price down, because it was an investment property, therefore energy efficiency wasn't higher on their priority list. But that would be interesting to know that. So someone else had mentioned how depending on who the builders are that are participating, and even the brick conversation that you're talking about, brick, knowing, if it was a high concentration of, say, Ontario builders, we have a lot of brick in Ontario, whereas maybe in the prairies, there's less brick. So it's kind of interesting to know, do you have any sort of breakdown of kind of where the responses are coming from, and if that does have an influence on some of these responses?
It does, yeah. I would say participation-wise, the highest participation was Ontario homeowners or home buyers, Ontario, then Alberta, and then actually Saskatchewan came in third, and then BC. So, and then we've gotten some of the maritime buyers as well. Mm-hmm. But that is something that, again, in the actual online. So we use Power BI, Microsoft Power BI is what we put the file in. So anybody can go in, and we've made it really simple to slice the data. So if you're a builder that's in Regina, you can, click on your geo and just say, I only care about the preferences of consumers that are in this marketplace, because that's exactly the reason. The only fair way to serve up this type of data is by making it mineable by geo and by other fields as well. So that's first year of the study. We looked at it as like, this is a great amount of data, but how do you make use of it? Because the builder in Alberta is so different than a builder in Toronto, and the product types they put up, and even the buyer types they're targeting sometimes. So yeah, definitely something you can slice.
So I know the CHBA offers to members only the report, but you're talking about searchable, mineable data. And how would somebody access that? That
comes with the report. So we do, it's a PDF national report. So that's kind of your static report. But then it comes with this Power BI, this Microsoft Power BI file is how we're doing it this year. This is new this year. We used to use a proprietary software to dice and slice it. And we did make it available to any purchaser or user of the report. It was a bit more bumpy to do. So we've set it up as this Microsoft Power BI file, which is, it's easy to click. You just basically click, yeah, I want all the data, or I want just Alberta data. And then the report repopulates in the next 38 pages, just showing Alberta data, or I just want baby boomer data, repopulates, or you can do multiple fields. So we've made it really user friendly, and that's available to anybody who goes to CHBA to get the report gets access to that file too.
Wow, that is a considerable value add. So yeah. So some other questions. I know we have a couple more minutes here. I'll just check the time. Just a couple more minutes. So someone was asking what kind of countertops are desired. Because I know you put solid surfaces were kind of in the lower end.
Right. Yeah. Number one is quartz. Number two is granite. But quartz has been going up as granite goes down. When the study started, it was granite was top, but it's number one is quartz.
Okay, quartz is the one. Okay, I'm not surprised actually. I think I've seen that trend as well. Let's see here. Do you have any ideas about what heat pump systems will be pushed for homes in total electric or both gas-fired electric heat pumps? Was there any sort of discussion on what people were interested in? Were they interested in going all electric versus dual fuel?
That isn't even on the study. That's a great point, though. That's just funny because that might be. Yeah, I'm going to mark it as a take. We don't get into mechanicals like that and that level. But selfishly, I'd like that data too, because we're looking at building an accessory dwelling in the new year, and we're looking at.
Tim, that's a really good question. It does sort of rabbit trail off into energy and sustainability preferences, but we should follow up with that with Evan and Sonia at CHBA.
I agree.
That's actually a very prevalent question we get asked in a variety of webinars. So,
oh man, and I was, again, personally, selfishly, I'm thinking about that myself right now. So it's like, yeah, interesting.
Well, and municipalities and the government are pushing in this sort of these sorts of directions in different ways, right? Yes, so it's just something that be interesting to see where you may get pushback going in one direction or the other from the audience.
Great feedback. I like that.
Okay, well, I think we have come to the end of our time. It is 2:30 right now. So thank you so much, Tim, for this fantastic survey review. And so a resource email will be sent out after today, and it will include a link to the recording as well as Tim's slides. And we can put a link in to where the CHBA members can access the report, and as well as a survey link. So once we close the webinar, a little Survey Monkey link will pop up. And if you could just answer that, give us some feedback on the webinar, that would be fantastic. And of course, as always, we want to thank Enbridge for their continued sponsorship of these webinars. And it sounds like we're going to have a really exciting webinar season coming up this year for 2022. Then more of that will be announced in the future. So thank you again, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to Building Knowledge, and thanks Enbridge so much for having me here today. Thanks for all the participants for joining today too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So you'll get your email in the next day or two. Okay, have a great afternoon, everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.